The first time I realized something was wrong, I was standing in my own driveway watching a stranger take pictures of my front porch. She smiled politely, clipboard in hand, and said, "I'm with Palmetto Coastal Realty. Gorgeous place, sir. You must be proud of it." I remember nodding slowly, pretending I understood why she was there, though my chest felt like it was full of bees. When I asked who she was working for, she flipped a page and said a name I hadn't expected to hear. My grandson, Tyler. That was the moment everything stopped making sense. My $2.5 million mansion in Savannah, Georgia, the home I'd built with my late wife, was apparently listed for sale, and I hadn't signed a damn thing. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. I waited until she drove off before stepping inside. The air was thick, still carrying the scent of lemon cleaner from my morning routine. On the kitchen island sat a stack of mail, one envelope from the bank, another from the HOA, and then one from a realty firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a glossy brochure with my address printed across the top in elegant serif font. Exclusive waterfront property, now available. The listing price, $2,195,000. Below it, photographs of my home, my furniture, my art, even the piano my wife used to play. Each image looked stolen. I sat down at the table, hands flat, eyes on that number. $2.5 million. The realtor must have taken those photos after Tyler's last visit. He'd been over 2 weeks ago, talking about helping with taxes and modernizing the portfolio. He'd said it in that confident, tech startup tone that made me feel like I was from another century. I remember him standing right where I was sitting now, gesturing toward the dining room and saying, "Grandpa, this place is worth a fortune just sitting here. You could live smaller and smarter." I told him I was already living just fine. He laughed like I'd told a joke. That night, I opened the folder where I kept my most important papers. The deed, insurance policies, my late wife's will, and the updated trust Marjorie, my attorney, had drawn up last spring. Everything was where it should have been. But when I opened my email later, there it was. A forwarded message from a realtor's office confirming listing authorization from property holder, signed and notarized. My name sat neatly beneath the digital signature, only it wasn't my handwriting. The date read November 7th. I hadn't left the house that day. My arthritis had kept me home all morning. I printed the email, highlighted the signature line, and laid it next to a copy of my driver's license. The difference was obvious to anyone with eyes. But to a computer? Maybe not. I poured a small bourbon and sat there in silence, staring at both pages. Tyler had my trust login. He'd helped set it up months ago when the online banking system confused me. That thought landed hard. He hadn't just listed my home, he had access. At midnight, I logged into my account. The first thing I noticed was the notification. Pending transaction. Palmetto Coastal Realty escrow deposit received. My heart sank. He hadn't just listed it. He'd sold it. The closing date was set for the coming Friday. I checked the balance. No money had moved yet, but a sale agreement was already uploaded. $2,495,000 even. I printed every page I could find, one after another, until the printer groaned. The sound of paper feeding out into the tray echoed through the house like footsteps. I wasn't angry yet. Anger would come later. Right then, I was still in disbelief. The kind that sits heavy in the chest before it turns into resolve. At 2 a.m., I called Marjorie. She didn't answer, of course, but her voicemail caught my words. "Marjorie, it's John. Something's wrong. Tyler's done something big. Call me in the morning." I hung up, poured another bourbon, and sat by the window watching the reflection of my wife's piano in the glass. She used to say, "Paper tells the truth, even when people don't." So I began writing. Dates, times, names, every detail I could recall. The realtor's visit, the email timestamp, the escrow line, the listing code. By the time dawn bled through the blinds, the page was full. My hand ached, but my mind was clear. I folded the papers into a manila envelope and wrote one word across the front in thick black ink. Proof. Then I said it out loud to the empty room, as if my wife could hear me still. He might have sold it, but he sold it to the wrong man. The first time I realized something was wrong, I saw a woman standing in my driveway taking photos of my porch. She looked professional, holding a clipboard and smiling politely. When I walked over, she said, "I'm with Palmetto Coastal Realty. Gorgeous place, sir. You must be proud of it." I told her I was, though I had no idea why she was there. Then she said, "Your grandson, Tyler, asked me to stop by before the closing next week." Closing? My stomach dropped. My $2.5 million mansion in Savannah, the one my wife and I built with 40 years of savings, wasn't for sale. Not by me. When the realtor drove off, I went inside, the air still smelling faintly of lemon polish. On the kitchen island sat a stack of mail, and in it, an envelope with the same realty logo I'd just seen on her clipboard. Inside was a glossy brochure. My address was printed across the top in large, bold letters. Exclusive waterfront property, now available. The photos showed every inch of my home. My furniture, my paintings, even the piano my wife loved. It felt like someone had photographed my memories and put a price tag on them. That night, I pulled out my paperwork folder, the one that held my deed, insurance papers, and the trust my lawyer, Marjorie, helped me update last spring. Everything looked normal. Still, something in my gut told me to check online. When I opened my email, there it was. A forwarded message from Palmetto Coastal Realty confirming a signed listing agreement. My name was typed cleanly at the bottom, with a digital signature attached. But I never signed that document. The date said November 7th. That day, I hadn't even left the house. I printed the email and stared at the signature. It looked close, too close. Tyler had helped me set up online access to my trust months ago, back when I thought he was just being a caring grandson. Now I realized that same access could have been his way in. I logged into my account, hands shaking. The page loaded slowly, the kind of slow that makes your heart race. When it finally appeared, I saw it. Pending transaction, Palmetto Coastal Realty escrow deposit received. My jaw clenched. He hadn't just listed the property. He had sold it. I opened the attached sale agreement. $295,000, with closing scheduled for Friday. My heart thudded in my chest. There it was, every page signed, notarized, sealed, and fake. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My own grandson had forged my name and sold the home where he learned to walk, where his grandmother used to bake him cookies. Betrayal isn't loud. It's quiet, like the sound of a paper feed in a printer. I printed everything, emails, contracts, receipts, until the tray overflowed. I didn't sleep that night. I called Marjorie around 2 in the morning, knowing she wouldn't pick up. Her voicemail beeped, and I said, "Marjorie, it's John. Something's wrong. Tyler's done something terrible. Call me first thing." After I hung up, I poured myself a bourbon and stared at the piano in the corner. My wife used to tell me, paper never lies, even when people do. I picked up a pen and started writing. Every detail I could remember. The realtor's name, the email timestamp, the escrow notice, the $2.5 million price. By sunrise, the page was filled with my notes. My hand hurt, but my head felt steady for the first time all night. I gathered the papers, slid them into a manila envelope, and wrote one word on the front in thick black ink. Proof. I set it on the table, looked at the photo of my wife smiling beside the piano, and whispered, "He might have sold it, but he sold it to the wrong man." Would you like me to move on to Act 2 in this same balanced tone? Realistic, emotional and easy to follow. When I woke the next morning, I felt like the air in the house had changed. The same walls, the same furniture, but everything felt heavier, like the home itself knew it had been betrayed. I made coffee, but it went cold before I touched it. Every corner of that house was a reminder. My wife's favorite chair by the window, the photo of Tyler as a little boy holding a fishing rod, smiling up at me like I hung the moon. That boy was gone. The man he'd become had sold the roof over my head. Marjorie called right at 8. Her voice was calm, steady, the kind that keeps you from falling apart. "John, I got your voicemail," she said. "Start from the beginning." I told her everything, the photos, the email, the escrow deposit. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Don't touch anything online. Forward me every document you have. We'll trace the paper trail first, then the money." An hour later, she called back. "It's bad, John," she said. "The sale's already registered as pending. The realtor thinks you authorized it. They have an e-signature that matches your trust documents." "How could it match?" I asked. "You said Tyler helped you set up digital access, right? He probably copied your verified signature stamp from the trust update." I felt my throat tighten. "So it looks real." "On paper, yes. But legally, not for long. I've handled worse. We'll fix this." Her voice steadied me. I printed her email confirmation and wrote the time next to it. 9:27 a.m. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of the floor as I walked to the study. I sat at my desk, staring at the piano again. My wife used to hum while she played, sometimes off-key, but always gentle. I missed that sound. I missed her calm. Around noon, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My stomach dropped when I saw Tyler through the window, smiling, waving like nothing was wrong. He walked in without knocking, same as always. "Morning, Grandpa," he said, setting his phone on the counter. "You look tired." I didn't answer. "You saw the listing, huh?" he asked, pretending it was a joke. "I was going to tell you once it all cleared. Less stress that way." "Less stress for who?" I asked quietly. He sighed, acting like I was the unreasonable one. "Look, the market's great right now. We can reinvest. You'll still live comfortable." "You sold my house, Tyler." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Technically, I facilitated a sale. You'll get the proceeds." The realtor wired the funds to the family account. "Our account." I stood up so slowly he finally stopped smiling. "There is no our account," I said. He hesitated. "You wouldn't understand how digital trusts work, Grandpa. It's complicated." I looked him dead in the eye. "I built ships for 40 years. I understand structure. And I understand theft." His face hardened. And for the first time, I saw the arrogance behind the charm. "It's done," he said. "Paperwork's filed. Money moves Friday." Then he picked up his phone and added, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." He left without another word. The sound of his car engine faded down the street, but the echo of his voice stayed. That night, I couldn't eat. I sat in the living room with the folder open on the coffee table, reading every document again and again. The more I looked, the clearer the trail became. Dates, timestamps, fake authorizations, and one key detail Marjorie had missed. The escrow deposit wasn't marked for Tyler's account. It was scheduled to transfer to Palmetto Coastal Realty Holding account. That meant the realtor hadn't yet sent the money. If I could get to them before Friday, maybe, just maybe, the deal could be stopped or reversed. I took out my notebook and wrote one line in the center of the page. Thursday, meet realtor before escrow clears. Then I underlined it 3 times. When I finally went to bed, the house felt different again. Not empty this time, but waiting, like it knew I had a plan forming. Before closing my eyes, I whispered to the dark, "You think you've stolen from me? Tyler. But you just opened a door you can't close. Would you like me to move forward to Act 3 in the same clear cinematic tone?" The next morning started cold and gray. the kind of Charleston morning that makes the air taste like salt and metal. I woke before sunrise, the sky barely a shade lighter than the marsh. My mind had already decided what to do long before my feet hit the floor. I made a pot of coffee, opened my notebook, and read my note from the night before. Thursday, meet Realtor before escrow clears. That line was my lifeline. At 8:00 a.m., I called Palmetto Coastal Realty. The receptionist's voice was bright and polite, the kind you hear on ads for beach condos. "Good morning, Palmetto Coastal. How can I help you?" "This is John Hale," I said evenly. "I believe you're handling the sale of my property on Riverbend Lane." There was a pause. Paper shuffled. "Yes, sir. We're scheduled to close Friday morning." "Is there an issue?" "There's more than an issue," I said. "That sale is fraudulent. I never listed my home, and I never signed authorization." Her voice went tight. "Oh, I see. Would you like to speak to our broker?" "I'd like to speak to whoever signed that paperwork with my name." Within minutes, I was connected to a man named Rick Dalton, the lead broker. His tone was cautious, curious. "Mr. Hale, I understand there's some confusion." "No confusion," I said. "Someone forged my signature. I have proof." He hesitated. "Your grandson handled the listing. We have an e-signature from your account." Everything looked legitimate. "I want to see the contract in person," I said. "Today," he agreed, perhaps out of guilt or curiosity, and we set a meeting for 3 that afternoon. Marjorie called as I was getting ready to leave. I told her my plan. She sighed but didn't stop me. "Keep it calm," she said. "Bring your documents. Ask for a copy of everything they have. Don't accuse, just collect." "Got it," I said. "And John," she added, "record the conversation. Georgia law allows it if one party knows." I tucked my phone into my jacket pocket, screen recording ready, and drove downtown. The city looked different when you're betrayed. It loses color, gains clarity. The storefronts, the cobblestones, even the Spanish moss hanging from the trees looked sharper, harder. Palmetto Coastal's office sat on Bay Street, all glass and brushed steel. Inside, the air smelled like citrus cleaner and ambition. Rick met me at the door, tall, tanned, trying for charm. "Mr. Hale, glad you came in." He led me to a small meeting room, walls covered in framed photos of sold homes. One of them was mine. I sat down across from him and slid my folder across the table. "Here's my deed, notarized. Here's the trust summary. And here's a copy of your email with my signature." "Look closely." "It's not me." He studied it for a long moment. His brow furrowed. "This does look unusual." "It's fake," I said. "And if you process that sale, you'll be part of the fraud." He sighed, rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mr. Hale, I've been in this business 20 years. I've seen plenty of scams, but not like this. Let me check something." He left the room for a few minutes, came back with a thin folder. "Here's what we have on file." Inside were the documents Tyler had uploaded: a forged ID scan, the fake e-signature, and a verification photo of Tyler himself holding my driver's license. He must have taken it months ago when helping me renew it online. My stomach turned. Rick tapped the page. "We've flagged this now. The sale's technically pending, but we can freeze escrow until verification clears." "Do it," I said. "I'll contact the buyer's agent immediately." He picked up his phone and made the call right there in front of me. "This is Rick at Palmetto Coastal. We've got a hold on the Riverbend Lane closing. Identity verification issue. No funds to be released." Then he hung up and turned to me. "You just saved yourself a hell of a mess, Mr. Hale." "No," I said quietly. "I'm just cleaning up one someone else made." He offered to walk me out, but I told him I'd find my way. Before leaving, he handed me his card. "I'll call once escrow confirms the freeze. And, I'm sorry, family or not, that's a terrible thing to go through." Outside, the sky had cleared, thin sunlight spilling across the street. I stood on the steps, taking a slow breath. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like control returning. Tyler thought he'd beaten me with speed, but he'd forgotten I was patient. I'd spent decades building ships, one rivet at a time. I knew how to make things watertight. When I got home, I found a new text from him waiting. "Grandpa, don't make this ugly. You'll still get your share." I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot and added it to my file. That night I called Marjorie. "The realtor froze the funds," I said. There was a pause, then a small laugh. "Good," she said. "Now, let's make sure they never move again." I looked out through the window at the dark water of the river, the moon reflecting off it like a sheet of steel. I whispered to the quiet house, "You're safe for now, Margaret. Would you like me to continue to act 4 in the same grounded, cinematic tone?" The next morning came with the low hum of rain on the porch roof. That soft savanna drizzle that seems to wash away noise, but not thought. I made my coffee and watched it drip down the window while the news muttered in the background. On the counter lay my growing stack of proof. Emails, screenshots, the fake signature, the realtor's card, and the new text from Tyler still glowing on my phone screen. "You'll still get your share." He didn't understand. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect, and about the house that still carried my wife's laugh in its walls. By 9, Marjorie had called the bank's fraud division, and by noon, she and Luis, my bank manager, had locked every account that might even touch that escrow. Luis called me directly after the freeze. "Mr. Hale, no funds can move in or out without your signature and mine. You're protected." His voice carried the calm of someone who knew what he was doing. "I'll personally watch for any transfer attempts." I thanked him, told him I owed him lunch, and wrote it all down in my notebook like I'd been trained to record every bolt and plate in the shipyard days. Routine steadied me. In the afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Rick, the realtor. He looked different from the day before. Less polished, more human. "Mr. Hale," he said, "I wanted to stop by in person. You should know something. When I froze that escrow, the system sent automatic notifications to all parties. Your grandson's reaction was immediate." He pulled out his phone, showing me an email Tyler had sent him less than an hour after the freeze notice. "This is a misunderstanding. Release the funds now, or I'll have my attorney handle it." Rick gave a short, dry laugh. The part where he said, "My attorney," "Yeah, that's me now." I almost smiled. So he's panicking. He's realizing he's cornered. I told him the only way those funds move is with your approval and direct verification. He went quiet after that. Rick paused. "He'll probably try to reach you. Don't answer unless it's recorded." "I don't plan to," I said. That night, I sat at my desk with the soft lamplight spilling over the papers, the rain still whispering outside. I sorted everything into folders, one labeled financial, another legal, another personal evidence. It was almost therapeutic, watching chaos turn into structure. At the bottom of the pile, under a receipt for new locks and a printed screenshot of the realtor's confirmation, I found an old photo of Tyler at 15, grinning. Baseball glove in hand, the world still open to him. I studied that face for a long time and asked myself the question that had haunted me since this started. When did he stop being my grandson and start being my thief? The phone buzzed at 8:43 p.m. Unknown number. I answered anyway, voice recorder running. "Grandpa, it's me." "I know." "You went behind my back," he said, his voice sharp, tired, restless. "I just told the truth," I said. "You don't get it, do you? I was fixing things before they got worse. You're sitting on a gold mine doing nothing." "That gold mine is my home, Tyler." He exhaled hard through his nose. "You're impossible. You could have trusted me." "I did," I said quietly. "That's how we got here." He went silent for a few seconds, then muttered something about calling his lawyer, though his tone sounded more like bluff than plan. I didn't argue. I just said, "Make sure your lawyer brings a map, because you've lost your way." Then I hung up. By midnight, the rain had stopped. The air smelled like wet brick and pine. I sat by the window, notebook open, and wrote my final line for the night. Funds frozen. Family cracked. Justice next. The house was silent except for the slow ticking of the clock and the creak of old floorboards expanding in the warmth. The next morning, Marjorie called again. "He's called the bank twice, pretending to be your assistant." Louise caught it both times. "Persistent kid," I said. "Persistent crook," she corrected. Then her tone softened. "You did the right thing coming forward. Most people freeze under family pressure." I looked around at the house. Every photo, every mark on the floor. "This house taught me to stand firm," I said. That afternoon, Rick emailed to confirm the buyer had officially withdrawn from the deal. "They don't want to be tied up in court," he wrote. "They'll move on." And just like that, the sale vanished. The house was mine again in every way that mattered. That night, I stood in the entryway and turned off the smart lock's notifications. For the first time in months, I didn't need them. I walked through the quiet halls, touched the piano lid, and whispered, "You're safe, Margaret. It's over." Only it wasn't quite over. The house was safe, the money untouched. But something inside me still demanded a reckoning. Tyler's betrayal had to be more than stopped. It had to be seen. And I knew exactly where that would happen. Under oath, in front of the same people who once thought he was the future of this family. Would you like me to continue to Act 5 in this same grounded cinematic style? By Friday morning, I was done waiting. The sun broke through the mist over the Savannah River, that pale gold light that always reminds me of my wife's wedding band. I poured myself a cup of coffee, straightened my shirt, and called Marjorie. "It's time," I told her. "If he wants to play smart, we'll bring him to court." She didn't sound surprised. "I was hoping you'd say that," she said. "I've already filed a request for an injunction. The hearing's been set for next Thursday." She paused, voice softer now. "John, this won't just protect your property. It'll set a record. Elder financial fraud, digital forgery, attempted transfer of trust assets. It's open and shut." I exhaled slowly. "Good," I said. "Let's make sure he remembers it that way." That afternoon, I called Rick to thank him. "You saved me a lot more than money," I said. He chuckled quietly. "You saved yourself, Mr. Hale. I just stopped the paperwork." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "The buyer's attorney mentioned they'd been suspicious. Said your grandson seemed desperate to close fast. Kept asking if funds could be wired early." I wrote that down word for word in my notebook. Desperation always leaves fingerprints. 2 days later, Tyler showed up again. No knock, just footsteps in the gravel. I saw him through the front window. Nice suit, slicked back hair, false confidence hanging off him like cologne. I opened the door before he could ring the bell. "You can talk from the porch," I said. He smiled, trying to look composed. "You embarrassed me, Grandpa. You froze everything." "I didn't embarrass you," I said. "You did that all by yourself." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I messed up. But you can't take this to court. It'll ruin both of us." "No," I said calmly. "It'll fix one of us." He sighed. "You really think anyone's going to believe you over me?" "I've got documentation." I pointed to the folder under my arm. "And I've got truth." He took a step closer, eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't do that to family." "Family doesn't sell your home," I said. "You made a choice. Now live with it." For a second, he looked like that boy again, the one who used to fall asleep on my couch after fishing trips. Then the mask came back. "You'll regret this," he muttered, and walked off. I let him go. You don't chase ghosts. You let them fade. That night, I met with Marjorie in her office. She'd already assembled the file, neatly tabbed, color-coded, the kind of perfection I'd always admired in her work. "We'll keep it simple," she said. "Forgery, fraud, and attempted transfer without consent. We'll show the paper trail, your deed, the emails, the escrow freeze, his text messages. The judge won't need long. What about the realtor? I asked. Rick's testifying. He's angry too. His name was almost tied to this mess. I nodded. Everything was falling into place. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Thursday. I spent the next few nights reviewing my notes the way I used to check blueprints. Slowly, line by line, until every detail matched. The night before the hearing, Ruth came by with a homemade pie. You ready? She asked. As ready as I'll ever be, I said. She smiled. Good. He took your peace once. Don't let him take your pride. When I went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to the ceiling fan hum, staring at the faint outline of the chandelier above me. I wasn't nervous. I was focused. I'd spent my life building things meant to last. Ships, houses, even memories. Tyler had tried to sell one of them. Tomorrow, I'd show him some things can't be sold, not for any price. At dawn, I put on my gray suit, the one my wife bought me 15 years ago for our anniversary. It still fit. I looked at myself in the mirror. Older, sure, but unshaken. The reflection staring back wasn't a victim anymore. It was someone who'd been tested and decided to stand. Before I left the house, I placed my hand on the piano lid and whispered, "Wish me luck, Margaret." Then I turned off the light, locked the door, and stepped into the morning. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught one last look at the house in the rearview mirror. The porch, the windows, the white paint glowing under the sunrise. My home, my history, my proof. The courthouse waited, and so did the truth. The courthouse sat on the corner of Bay and Liberty, old brick and white columns rising out of the morning mist. I parked under an oak tree, sat for a moment with the engine off, and listened to the ticking of the cooling motor. The sun was just starting to burn through, painting gold on the courthouse dome. It felt strange to be here as the one wronged, not the one accused. For a second, I pictured my wife sitting beside me, her hand resting over mine like she used to when she wanted me calm before something big. "It's just a meeting," she would have said. I smiled faintly, grabbed the folder, and walked inside. The place smelled of coffee and paper. Every courthouse does. Marjorie was waiting by the security line, hair tied neatly, her blue folder tucked under her arm. "Morning, John," she said. "Ready to put this to bed?" "Been ready since the day he took the first picture," I said. We took our seats near the front. Tyler came in 5 minutes later, wearing a dark navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. His lawyer, a man with slick hair and too much cologne, followed him like a shadow. Tyler didn't look at me at first. When he finally did, his eyes didn't carry guilt, just panic, pretending to be confidence. When the bailiff called our case, Hale versus Hale, the sound echoed through the room like a hammer hitting steel. We stood. The judge, a calm, middle-aged woman with reading glasses halfway down her nose, gave a polite nod. "Let's proceed," she said. Marjorie went first. She didn't waste words. "Your Honor, this is a case of digital forgery, attempted property theft, and elder financial exploitation. The evidence will speak for itself." She handed over the first stack of documents: the deed, the fake signature, the realtor's statement, and the escrow freeze. The respondent, Mr. Tyler Hale, sold his grandfather's $2.5 million home using falsified authorization. The judge glanced up. "And the funds?" "Frozen," Marjorie said, "thanks to Mr. Hale's vigilance and the cooperation of the listing broker." Then it was Tyler's turn. His lawyer stood, buttoned his jacket, and began the usual dance. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. My client had power of attorney granted verbally." Marjorie cut in, calm but sharp. "Verbal doesn't authorize a property sale, counselor. The law requires notarized, written proof." The judge nodded. "She's correct. Continue," Tyler's lawyer faltered. Tyler jumped in, voice raised. "I was helping him. He doesn't understand how online banking works." The judge raised her hand. "Mr. Hale, you'll speak only when addressed." That shut him up, but barely. His knee bounced under the table. That shut him up, but barely. His knee bounced under the table. Then Marjorie played the recording, the one I'd made on the porch. Tyler's voice filled the courtroom. "You went behind my back. You could have trusted me." Followed by mine, calm but cutting. "I did." "That's how we got here." The sound ended. You could feel the silence stretch like a held breath. The judge leaned back, eyes on Tyler. "Did you forge your grandfather's signature?" "No, ma'am," he said quickly. "Then explain the notarized signature belonging to a person whose license expired in 2023. He froze. His mouth opened, then closed again. His lawyer looked down at his notes like he was wishing he were anywhere else. Marjorie slid one more paper forward. The email from Rick confirming the fake listing, along with the bank record showing the escrow freeze. "The system caught it," she said, "but the intent was there. The only reason this man still has his home is because he paid attention." The judge nodded slowly, then looked right at me. "Mr. Hale, you've kept clear records, detailed and consistent. You've shown admirable restraint. You may be the calmest plaintiff I've seen this month." I smiled slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor. Ships don't sail without logs." That got a faint chuckle from the clerk. When it was done, the judge didn't deliberate long. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The property at 412 Riverbend Lane remains solely under the ownership of Mr. John Hale. Any attempt by the respondent to interfere with or transfer said property will be subject to criminal review." She paused, then added, "And given the falsified documents, this will be referred to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution under Georgia's elder protection statutes." The gavel came down once. The sound was final, clean. Tyler turned toward me as the room emptied. "You really did it," he said, voice low. "No, Tyler," I said. "You did." He looked at the floor, and for a second I saw the boy he used to be, the one who'd ask me to fix his bike chain and promise to pay me back with chores. Then that image faded, and all that was left was a man who thought he could outsmart his own blood. Marjorie touched my arm. "Let's go home," she said. Outside, the sun had climbed high, lighting up the courthouse steps. The air smelled of clean stone and something new, freedom. I looked up at the sky and said quietly, "We did it, Margaret." The house waited for me down by the river, solid and still. Justice had a sound that day. It was the echo of my footsteps on those courthouse steps, each one lighter than the last. Would you like me to continue to the next act, fallout and reflection, in the same style? The drive home from the courthouse felt lighter than air. For the first time in months, my shoulders weren't carrying the weight of someone else's lies. The sun poured through the windshield, warm and clean, and the river glimmered beside the road like it was proud of me. I parked in my driveway, stepped out, and just stood there for a moment, staring at the house. My wife's roses were blooming again, small red bursts against the fence line. It almost felt like she'd timed it that way. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. The morning paper still sat folded on the kitchen table, untouched. I poured myself a coffee, though this time I actually drank it. The bitterness didn't sting. It grounded me. Then I opened my folder one last time and began sorting. The pages that once felt like proof of fear now looked like symbols of control. The fake contract, the forged signature, the court order with the judge's signature, it all told the story of someone who refused to be erased. At noon, Marjorie called. Her voice carried that same confident ease she had in court. "John, I just wanted to tell you the DA's office has officially opened an investigation into Tyler's actions. You don't need to do anything else. They'll handle it from here." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I didn't want to ruin him," I said quietly. "I just wanted to stop him." She hesitated. "Sometimes stopping someone is the only way to save them." After she hung up, I sat on the porch with my notebook open on my lap. The wind was soft, carrying the smell of salt and fresh-cut grass. Ruth walked over from next door, wiping her hands on her apron. "Heard the good news," she said. I smiled. "It's over." She tilted her head. "Is it really?" I thought about that. The court ruling, the injunction, the DA's case, it all meant the danger was gone. But the wound? That would take time. "It's over enough," I said finally. That night, the phone rang once more. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Tyler's voice came through, smaller than I remembered. "Grandpa," he said, almost whispering, "I wanted to say sorry." I didn't speak at first. He filled the silence. "I messed up. I thought I was helping us both. I see now I was just helping myself." "Why?" I asked. My voice stayed calm, but it carried years of weight. "You had everything you needed. You didn't need to steal it." "I thought it'd make me someone," he said. "You already were someone," I told him. "You just stopped acting like it." He sniffed once, maybe trying not to cry. "They said I could take a plea deal. Community service, restitution, all that." "You'll do what's right," I said. "That's the first step." He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. We just sat there, two voices separated by years and choices, until he finally said, "Take care of the house for me." "I always have," I said, and hung up gently. The next morning, I woke early, sunlight cutting across the room in sharp gold lines. I made breakfast, eggs, bacon, the simple kind my wife used to make on Sundays, and sat by the window watching the river move. There was peace now, not the loud kind people post about, but the quiet kind that fills a room like air after a storm. Later, I walked to the piano, ran my hand over the smooth wood, and whispered, "We kept it safe, Margaret." It wasn't just the house I'd protected, it was her memory, my dignity, and the truth that no signature can fake. That afternoon, I wrote the last line in my ledger. Case closed. Home intact. Lesson learned. Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does. Then I set the pen down, closed the cover, and let the silence of the house wrap around me like an old friend. Outside, the roses leaned into the wind, and the light through the window hit the photo on the mantel just right. Me and her, smiling at a home we built together. That's what remained. That's what lasted. A few weeks passed, and the house finally started to feel like home again. The fear had drained out of the walls, replaced by something quieter. Acceptance, maybe. Or peace. I spent my mornings the same way I always had before all this began. Coffee on the porch, watching the river roll past, the newspaper folded on my lap. But now there was a stillness inside me that hadn't been there in years. I didn't check the locks every hour anymore. I didn't flinch when the phone rang. I'd rebuilt my life, one honest paper at a time. Tyler's case moved quickly. Marjorie called to update me every few days. The DA had offered him a plea deal, no jail if he paid back the legal costs and completed a year of community service. "It's fair," she said. "He'll feel the weight without being crushed by it." I agreed. Justice didn't need to destroy him. It just needed to remind him that every choice leaves a mark. One evening, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address, just my name in shaky pen. Inside was a single page. "I start my community service tomorrow. I'll never forget what I did, or what you didn't do. You didn't hate me. I'll try to deserve that." It wasn't much, but it was enough. I folded it carefully and placed it in the same drawer where my wife's recipe card rested. Some memories are too fragile to leave in the open. The days grew warmer. The roses by the fence bloomed deep red, heavy with the kind of life that only comes after hard weather. Ruth would stop by now and then, bringing pie or fresh lemonade. We didn't talk much about the trial anymore. She'd just sit across from me, knitting something small, while the sun slipped lower through the trees. "Feels peaceful here again," she said once. "It is," I told her. "Took a storm to clean the air." One morning, I drove into town to meet Rick. the realtor who'd helped stop the sale. He looked happier too, lighter. He shook my hand and said, "We've changed how we verify signatures now. Face ID, video proof. No one's getting away with that again." I smiled. Good. Maybe something good came out of all this after all. When I got home that afternoon, I stood at the edge of the porch and looked out across the river. The sky was bright and blue, the kind of day my wife would have called a keeper. I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the paperwork, the courtroom, the silence that followed, and realized something simple. Peace isn't what you get when life stops being hard. It's what you earn when you stop letting hard things change who you are. That night, I sat at the piano. I hadn't played in years. The keys were slightly out of tune, but the melody came back easy, quiet and slow. The sound filled the house, soft and low like breathing. I could almost feel her there beside me, humming along like she always used to. When the song ended, I left the lid open. Some things deserve to echo. Before bed, I opened my ledger for the last time and wrote one final line at the bottom of the page. Home safe. Family learned. I'm still standing. Then I closed it gently, turned off the lamp, and let the night settle around me. The river kept moving outside, carrying everything away that no longer needed to stay. Spring rolled into summer, and life found its rhythm again. The heat came early that year, the kind that made the air hum even before noon. I'd sit on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, watching the sunlight slide over the water, and think about how strange peace can feel after months of fighting for it. You spend so long preparing for the next blow that when quiet finally comes, it takes a while to believe it's real. Tyler sent another letter in late June, this one typed. He said he'd finished his community service, working with a local housing charity. They were restoring old homes for families who couldn't afford repairs. He wrote, "Every nail I hammered reminded me of what I almost took from you." There was no defense in his words this time, just understanding. He ended it with, "If you ever want to see the work we're doing, the door's open." I didn't answer right away. I read it twice, then left it on the piano under my wife's photograph. Some letters are meant to sit for a while before you know what to do with them. Marjorie stopped by one afternoon with a folder in hand. "Everything's finalized," she said, smiling. "The property title, the trust, the estate plan. It's all updated. Tyler's name is nowhere near it." She handed me the signed copies, and I ran my fingers over the embossed seal. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." She looked around the living room, taking in the sunlight, the piano, the open windows. "You know," she said, "it doesn't look like a courtroom story anymore. It looks like a home again." After she left, I walked through each room slowly. The house was quiet, but not the heavy kind of quiet it had been before. It was a living quiet now, the sound of things healed and settled. I stopped by the bookshelf, where my ledger sat closed for good. I didn't need to write anything down anymore. The story had finished itself. That weekend, Ruth convinced me to come with her to the community garden. The place buzzed with laughter, kids chasing each other through rows of tomatoes and sunflowers. At the far end, a young man in work gloves was teaching a boy how to build a wooden trellis. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. But when he turned, I saw him, Tyler. Thinner, sunburned, different somehow. He saw me too. He didn't call out. He just nodded once, the kind of nod that carries more words than a whole conversation. I nodded back. That was enough. That evening, I came home and opened the windows wide. The river wind carried in the scent of jasmine and summer grass. I made dinner, nothing fancy, just grilled fish and a little cornbread, and ate by the window while the last of the sunlight faded across the water. Somewhere out there, my grandson was building houses instead of selling them. That thought made me smile. When I finished eating, I walked to the piano and sat down again. My fingers found the keys, clumsy at first, then sure. The tune that came out was slower this time, softer, something between an ending and a beginning. I could almost hear her voice whispering, "You did good, John." When the song ended, I looked around at the house, my house, and said quietly, "We're okay now." Then I closed the lid, turned off the lamp, and let the night fill the room. Outside, the river kept moving, steady and endless, carrying away what didn't belong and leaving behind what mattered most. By August, the heat had settled deep into Savannah. The afternoons came heavy with the smell of magnolia and salt, the kind of summer that made the world slow down whether you wanted it to or not. I spent most of those days barefoot on the porch, listening to the cicadas and watching the sun drift low over the water. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. The story that had nearly broken me was over, and what remained was simple: routine, peace, and the steady comfort of a house that was mine again in every way that mattered. Sometimes I'd think back to the courtroom, the sound of the gavel, the way the light hit the judge's glasses as she read her ruling. It didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like closure. People always say justice and forgiveness can't share the same table, but I'd learned they can, as long as you stop expecting either to feel like victory. Justice just sets things straight. Forgiveness lets you breathe in the space it leaves behind. In early September, I finally decided to visit the housing charity Tyler had mentioned in his last letter. It wasn't planned. I was driving into town to buy lumber for a small repair on the porch railing, and my truck just seemed to steer that way on its own. The building was an old church-turned-workshop, filled with sawdust, the smell of varnish, and the sound of hammers. When I walked in, no one noticed me at first. Then I saw him, Tyler, in jeans and a faded t-shirt, covered in sawdust, laughing with a small group of volunteers as they lifted a door frame into place. He spotted me a few seconds later. His face froze, then softened. He walked over slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said quietly. "Didn't expect to come," I answered. He nodded, then looked down. "I'm trying to fix things. Not with money this time. Just work." "I can see that," I said. There was a long pause, but it wasn't uncomfortable. "Your grandmother would have liked this," I added. He smiled, small but real. "I hope so." We didn't talk long. We didn't need to. When I left, he went back to work, and I stood outside for a moment, listening to the echo of hammers through the open doors. For the first time, I believed him. That evening, I drove back home just as the sky began to turn that deep orange that only Savannah sunsets know how to make. The house glowed in that light, its white paint almost gold. I parked the truck, stood for a while and let the warmth soak into my bones. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine cleaner and the roses Ruth had left in a vase on the counter. I sat by the piano, the same one that had seen every version of my life: joy, loss, betrayal, and now something better than all of them: peace. I didn't play that night. I just rested my hand on the lid, felt the smooth wood under my fingers, and thought about how lucky I was to have come through it, still standing. Before bed, I wrote one last note, nothing official this time, just a small scrap I tucked into the ledger before closing it forever. It said, "Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering and not letting it poison you." When I turned off the lights, the house stayed quiet and calm. Outside, the moon hung low over the river, casting silver light across the water. I watched it move, slow and sure, same as always. That's how it all ended. Not with revenge or regret, but with something far rarer: understanding. And the steady comfort of knowing that, after everything, I was still home. Autumn came softly, almost unnoticed. The air thinned, the evenings cooled, and the first leaves began to turn the color of copper coins along the riverbank. I remember the morning it finally felt different. The sun rose pale and gentle, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't wake up thinking about the past. I just sat on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching light crawl up the trees, and felt completely, perfectly still. Life had evened out again. I fixed small things around the house: squeaky hinges, loose planks, a stubborn window in the guest room. Each repair felt like reclaiming something, a quiet way of reminding myself that I still built, I still created. Some evenings Ruth would bring soup or tea, and we'd sit in the living room with the TV murmuring in the background, not really watching. We didn't need to fill the air anymore. Silence had become a kind of friend. Marjorie called once in October to check in. "All settled, John?" she asked. "More than settled," I said. "I've stopped checking the locks every night." "That's how you know it's over," she laughed. "When you start living without waiting for the next blow." "I think I've finally learned how," I said. Every week, a small envelope arrived in the mail from the housing charity. Tyler was sending updates, not letters, just progress photos. One showed a family smiling in front of a freshly painted porch. Another, a row of volunteers holding up a wooden frame. No words, no signature, just pictures. And somehow, that said more than anything else could. On the first Sunday of November, Pastor Eli invited me to the church renovation they'd been talking about all summer. "Tyler's been leading the carpentry," he said, almost as a hint. I went, partly out of curiosity, partly because the church had always felt like an extension of my home. When I arrived, the smell of sawdust and fresh paint hit me before I even stepped inside. Tyler was there, fitting a new door hinge. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. "Hi, Grandpa," he said simply. "Hi, son," I replied. We didn't talk about the past, or forgiveness, or mistakes. We didn't have to. The work in front of him said everything that needed saying. I stayed a while, helping where I could. Holding the ladder, steadying a beam, passing him nails. Every time our hands brushed, it felt like another small piece of something broken, clicking back into place. That night, back home, I stood at the piano again. The house was warm, the kind of warmth that comes not from heaters but from peace itself. I opened the lid and pressed one soft note. It hung in the air, steady and true. Then another, then a third. The melody formed without thought, slow, familiar. The same tune my wife used to play after dinner when life was simple. When the final note faded, I whispered to the empty room, "We made it through, Margaret." The air felt full somehow, like she was there, just for a moment, smiling the way she used to when I finally fixed something right. Before going to bed, I wrote one last message on a scrap of paper and tucked it inside the piano bench with all the old music sheets. Some things you lose, some you rebuild, and some come back better than before. Then I turned out the lights, let the house rest, and walked upstairs. The window was open, letting in the cool river air. I looked out across the water, still, silver, endless, and smiled. The story had started with betrayal and ended with balance. I hadn't just kept my home, I'd kept myself. And in the quiet heart of that old Savannah house, where every floorboard held a memory, I finally knew what peace truly sounded like. Winter came in slow, the way it always does in the South. Not with snow or storms, but with air that feels older somehow. The mornings were cool enough for a jacket, and the evenings carried that hush that only river towns get when the world settles early. My porch had become my favorite place again. Every day around 5, I'd pour a cup of tea, sit in the same chair where I used to worry about losing everything, and instead watch the light fade without a single thought pulling me backward. One evening, Ruth brought over a tin of cookies. "You've turned into a quiet man," she teased, setting them down. "Quiet's cheaper than therapy," I said, and she laughed that kind of laugh that fills a house. We talked for a while about nothing. Her daughter visiting from Atlanta, the town's Christmas parade, the new cafe opening by the pier, ordinary talk. It felt good. Around mid-December, a small package arrived on my doorstep. No label, just my name written in black ink. Inside was a framed photo. Me, Tyler, and my wife, taken years ago on the back porch. I remembered that day clearly. We'd been grilling burgers, Tyler maybe 10 or 11, hair too long, freckles showing through the sunlight. There was no note, no message, but there didn't need to be. He'd found a way to say what words couldn't fix. That night, I placed the frame on the mantel beside the old wedding photo of my wife. For a long moment, I just stood there, looking at both pictures together. One was a beginning, the other a reminder that even broken things can find their way home. Christmas week was quiet. The town filled with lights, carolers on the street corners, kids running in coats too big for them. I didn't decorate much, just a small wreath on the door and a few candles by the window. On Christmas Eve, Pastor Eli stopped by with his wife. We shared pie and talked about nothing heavy. Before leaving, he said, "You've done well, John. You found peace without bitterness." "That's rare," I smiled. "Bitterness is heavy," I said. "I carried enough of it this year." That night, I played the piano one last time before the year turned. My hands were slower, the notes softer, but the melody still found its way out. Halfway through the song, I heard the faintest creak, the sound of the floor settling. For a heartbeat, I could almost feel her beside me, humming like she used to. I didn't stop playing. I just let it happen. When the clock struck midnight, I poured myself a small drink, stood at the window, and watched fireworks flicker faintly above the river. Their reflections rippled in the water like sparks in a mirror. I thought of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the courtroom, the quiet healing that followed, and realized something that made me smile. Peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from surviving with your heart still open. Before heading to bed, I wrote one final note in the margin of my old ledger. Not as evidence this time, just as truth. The house stands, the family mends, and I'm still here. I set the pen down, turned off the lamp, and looked around the room one last time before the dark settled in. The roses outside brushed against the window in the wind. The river moved like it always did, steady, calm, forgiving. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel alone.